Tonight, faith in Washington.
You know, honestly, it changed something in me. I feel even stronger.
President Trump addresses the National Prayer Breakfast and announces big plans to create a White House faith office and more. Plus, Decision Day postponed for millions of federal workers. Will they accept a buyout or take their chances under the Trump administration? And rebuilding after the devastating wildfires in California. The latest on the ground and how Operation Blessing continues to offer hope to some of the hardest hit areas.
The children loved again these activities and they were very grateful, but we are more grateful to have this opportunity to share with them the love of Jesus and the courage that they can have in any circumstance.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Faith and politics on full display at the United States Capitol. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. The National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. is a long-standing tradition going back decades.
That's right. President Trump received a warm welcome there today. And as he has in the past, he made quite a bit of news. Senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright has the latest. Kelly, welcome.
Thank you, John and Jenna. President Trump announced he is launching a new presidential commission on religious liberty and an executive order that will target anti-Christian bias. Attorney General Pam Bondi will lead a new task force on stopping all forms of anti-Christian targeting and discrimination within the federal government. Also, it will prosecute anti-Christian violence and vandalism. And during his appearance at the annual National Prayer Breakfast, he announced that he will reestablish a White House faith office led by his longtime spiritual advisor, televangelist Paula White. The president started his day by urging America and Americans to trust in God.
Faith in God has always been the ultimate source of the strength that beats in the hearts of our nation. We have to bring religion back. We have to bring it back much stronger.
President Trump making a declaration of faith during the 73rd National Prayer Breakfast at the U.S. Capitol. He urged Republican and Democrat congressional members to unite in their focus on faith, hope, and love for God and country. The president reminding the lawmakers about leaders of the past who helped to guide America spiritually to be seen as a beacon of light. Leaders like George Washington, John Winthrop, and Billy Graham.
Billy Graham was very special. One floor below us, Reverend Graham's statue stands with an open Bible. The page turned to a letter from the Apostle Paul, which reads, "Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." Never give up. Never, ever give up. You can't.
At a second prayer breakfast, President Trump recognized one of the survivors of the October 7th attack in Israel. Noah Agora Amani was taken captive at the Nova Music Festival by Hamas.
For 245 harrowing days, Noah showed unwavering strength and courage and faith as she endured the unendurable, really, what she went through. But by the grace of God, she was rescued by the Israeli Defense Forces, and now she's come back to pray with us this morning.
The president continued his message about faith, focusing on the assassination attempt on his life when he was shot.
You know, honestly, it changed something in me. I feel even stronger. I believed in God, but I feel much more strongly about it. Something happened.
And in a reference to the Sermon on the Mount, President Trump said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Mr. Trump said he would like to be remembered someday as a man who served America and the world, as a man who sought peace. John, Jenna.
All right, Kelly, thank you. In other news, President Trump's federal employee buyout program is on hold tonight. Millions of federal workers had until midnight tonight to decide whether to take a buyout offer that would pay them through September if they agreed to resign. That plan, though, is now in limbo, temporarily blocked by a federal judge.
This all falls under the White House's government efficiency project, and one of its top targets, the nation's foreign aid and humanitarian agency known as USAID. As CBN's Caitlin Burke reports, while many Republicans call the agency corrupt, supporters say closing it would create devastating consequences worldwide.
Created by John F. Kennedy during the Cold War, USAID is responsible for delivering aid and assistance overseas. Now, the humanitarian agency is under the Trump administration microscope as it cracks down on government waste.
We are going line by line when it comes to the federal government's books. And this president and his team are making decisions across the board on, do these receipts serve the interests of the American people? Is this a good use of the American taxpayers' money? If it is not, that funding will no longer be sent abroad.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio is now overseeing USAID. He says while many of its important functions will continue, they must align to U.S. national interest.
The attitude that USAID has adopted over the years is, no, we are independent of the national interest. We fund programs irrespective of whether it's aligned or not aligned with a foreign policy. That's ridiculous. These are taxpayer dollars.
Critics of dismantling the agency say millions relying on U.S. foreign aid are now at risk. Andrew Natsios, former USAID director under George W. Bush, says it could also put Americans in danger.
You have to stop the disease in the country. The early warning system for the world are the AID missions in the field. There are 90 programs that AID has worked with the ministries of health to set up data collection systems for disease so we know what's going on. That's all shutting down now.
Natsios believes Trump's actions go against precedent, pointing out that changes under a new president are expected and should be implemented without shutting down an entire agency.
When I took over AID in 2001, I went through I had a committee go through all of the aid projects, every single one, and we eliminated dozens of projects that were, frankly, completely inconsistent with what President Bush wanted to do. I knew President Bush very well, and I knew what he wanted and what he did not want. We eliminated those programs within 2 months.
Some other federal agencies under scrutiny include the Departments of Education and Justice, plus the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. And joining us now is David May, Senior Research Analyst with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. David, welcome. So critics say it's wasteful, promotes liberal agendas. Senator Joni Ernst says she actually asked to review USAID financials and they threatened to sue her. I'd like to start with your overall thoughts on this slashing of USAID.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So USAID has an important mission. It's there to project American soft power. It's there to offer the carrots as opposed to the sticks from the U.S. military to help nations across the world, to help people in need, and also to project a positive image of the United States. And on top of that, to get people involved in the U.S. circle. If we're not helping them, then there's a strong chance that China or some other nefarious actors will be helping them and increasing debt and getting them in their cycle, in their circle of influence. So it has an important mission. The real question is it living up to that mission? And is there inefficiency? And are we funding in the $40 billion a year that we're giving to USAID? Are there programs that should be cut?
You know, I thought what was interesting in listening to Mr. Natsios and Caitlin's package was he talked about the early warning detection program and how that this puts Americans in danger. You just mentioned, you know, reforms at USAID. Many agree that reforms need to be made, but as you kind of alluded to, does this open the door to allow room for rival nations like Russia or China to step in and put America more at risk?
It's definitely a danger. As if the United States recedes from the world, other countries will step into that void. So if we're stepping out, then other countries will step in. But the question really just becomes, are the programs that we're funding aligned with our national interests?
Yeah, so in 2023, I believe $68 billion was spent on foreign aid by the United States. As you mentioned, some $40 billion of that was for USAID. David, how much of the agency's budget goes to the Middle East specifically, and what do these cuts mean for Israel?
So when it comes to the Middle East, So just, I guess, throwing out some numbers that since 1994, when they were created, or when they started funding the West Bank and Gaza, they've sent about 5.7 billion. They had about 500 million scheduled between 2021 and 2024, but the Hamas's October 7th attacks obviously changed that, and so they've, since that war began, have sent about $2.1 billion to the West Bank and Gaza.
Final question for you. I wanted to ask, USAID employees are stationed around the globe and even in some dangerous places. So what do these cuts mean for them and their families and their safety?
I guess we'll wait to see with that, but just in terms of the West Bank and Gaza, I mean, there's important things that they're funding, but I think one thing to note is that when USAID is funding things in Gaza, that's money that Hamas should be spending on its own people, but is instead able to spend on its tunnels and rockets.
Okay, David May with Foundation for Defense of Democracies. David, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, control the ports, control the world. China's shipping empire is expanding fast. What it means for America's future when Faith Nation returns.
Welcome back. A new fight over Chinese tech is heating up in Washington. Lawmakers are spearheading a bipartisan bill to ban the DeepSeek chatbot from government devices. The AI app, now the most downloaded in the U.S., has hidden code that could send user data straight to China. Officials say it's a clear national security threat, comparing it to the TikTok ban. Texas has already banned the app on government devices, along with the Navy and NASA.
Well, China is also working to expand its global influence by control of key shipping ports.
It's part of Beijing's agenda to use economic, military, and infrastructure projects as leverage to overtake the United States as the world's leading superpower. George Thomas brings us two key examples from Brazil and Kenya.
China wants to dominate the high seas, and so far, it's succeeding. 7 of the world's largest shipping ports are in China, with the port of Shanghai topping the list. It's the ports outside of the country's borders, though, that retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery tells CBN News concerns Washington and its allies the most.
China's primary goal is access for resource extraction, access for future operations. But that access has the long-term goal of China displacing the United States as the economic partner of choice globally.
These red dots show China's growing network of ports spanning each ocean and continent. Chinese companies, most owned by the communist government, have spent billions building 129 ports in more than 50 countries, many along vital and strategic shipping lanes.
Most of the stuff you buy crosses the world by sea. But shipping containers don't just hold goods. They hold something else too: power. And China is all in.
Peru's Chancay port is Beijing's latest mega port project, inaugurated in November by China's President Xi Jinping.
This is a significant development, a significant win, frankly, for the Chinese Communist Party in Latin America, in our American neighborhood.
At a cost of nearly $4 billion, China's state-owned COSCO Shipping controls 60% of the port and states it will reduce shipping time between China and South America by 10 days.
It's going to become the shipping hub between China and South America.
This is absolutely crucial for China, because China's only hope right now to rescue its grim situation at home on the economy is to export more. They realize they're being shut out of developed markets like the U.S., Canada, and as well the European Union, so they need what they call the Global South.
Today, China is South America's largest trading partner. And here in Brazil, the most populous and largest in the region, trade with Beijing surpasses the United States by a ratio of 2-to-1. Brad Bowman, Senior Director of the Center on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, says that America is dangerously losing influence in its own backyard, with countries historically aligned with Washington.
In many respects, we're just getting out-hustled by the Chinese Communist Party. We're taking our position for granted, And my read of history tells me that if you take what you have for granted and you don't compete and you don't defend it, that you're going to lose it.
Military experts express concerns that China's aggressive ownership of these international ports might allow it to gain military leverage, such as eventually hosting Chinese naval assets.
So is a port dual use? Of course it is, right? Because this massive new port in Peru might be serving large container ships today, but it can service PLA Navy vessels tomorrow.
Montgomery says many ports operated by Costco Shipping use a digital management software system called Logic to monitor ship and cargo movements. That system is also government-owned.
If the Chinese run your integrated management system for your ports, they're going to have undue influence during a crisis or casualty when you're trying to move military supplies or parts. And the Chinese have the ability to rapidly disrupt your port operating systems. They really have incredible insight into world trade, insight into military and security movements, and potentially the opportunity to disrupt them.
In 2013, President Xi launched China's Belt and Road Initiative, also known as the New Silk Road, stretching from East Asia to Europe, Africa, and South America. China has spent more than $1 trillion building roads, railways, power grids, ports, and more, all to gain influential international partnerships.
As part of its Belt and Road Initiative, China has also been spending quite a bit of money on the African continent. For example, in 2022, it built this major highway connecting the international airport with downtown Nairobi.
In Africa, between 2013 and 2023, China made over $800 billion worth of Belt and Road Initiative investments in Africa. That's a staggering sum. As a result, we're being rapidly displaced as the economic security partner of choice.
Whether in Africa, South America, or Asia, experts say it's clear China is on a mission to become the world's leading superpower.
China sees the United States as an existential threat, not because of anything that we say or do, but because of who we are. You have an insecure regime in Beijing is worried about the inspirational impact of America's values and form of governance over the Chinese people. So China wants to get rid of the United States because it believes that it will never be safe or secure as long as the American Republic exists.
Bowman says China's leaders want to accomplish this dominance without firing a shot.
They understand that a war with the United States would be very costly for them. So as Sun Tzu said more than 2.5 millennia ago, the acme of skill is to win without fighting. And by fighting, he meant bombs, bullets, and guns. So China is trying to defeat us without having to fire a kinetic shot, but they're firing shots already in the information, economic, and cyber domains. This problem is that Americans don't realize it, and predators like nothing better than slumbering prey.
George Thomas, CBN News, reporting from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and Nairobi, Kenya.
Coming up, destroyed homes, shattered lives, how Operation Blessing is bringing hope to California's wildfire victims.
Welcome back. The powerful California wildfires finally are under control, but for residents and business owners, rebuilding could take years.
Yeah, the CBN's Operation Blessing is still on the ground there helping out, providing physical and spiritual resources. Wendy Griffith reports.
The LA wildfires that broke out last month claimed at least 29 lives and destroyed some 16,000 homes and buildings. Many people escaped with just the clothes on their backs.
When the Palisades fire broke out, I had to evacuate so suddenly I didn't get to take much.
Operation Blessing team members accompanied the screenwriter to see the remains of her home, which burned to the ground when the fire swept through Pacific Palisades without much warning.
I felt so lost. Everything was cremated and incinerated. There was nothing you could recover. And I remembered that if you're lost, the only way you'll find yourself is in the service of others. I don't know what God has in store for me. My favorite verse is Mark 11:24. I hope that that's true. But I have to believe that he's going to put me in a better place than when I was.
Hot meals are also being provided for the volunteers helping in the relief effort.
And I have been sent out here with our disaster relief team to team together with Bel Air Church out here in Los Angeles, California, so that we can help to provide for people who have lost everything in these wildfires.
And this past Sunday, Operation Blessing and Superbook joined forces at 2 LA churches to bless children affected by the fires.
Who would like to pray today?
Reminding them that God is always with them.
The children loved again these activities and they were very grateful, but we are more grateful to have this opportunity to share with them the love of Jesus and the courage that they can have in any circumstance.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Still ahead, a special prayer in the midst of war. Finally tonight, talk of a possible Trump ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine by Easter.
Yes, but some are looking to a higher power for a just and lasting peace. The Museum of the Bible played host to a prayer service for Ukraine and Israel. About 100 Ukrainian pastors, leaders, and military members traveled to Washington for the National Prayer Breakfast and to host Ukrainian Week in D.C. The museum event highlighted Ukraine and Israel's common enemies.
Fighting evil and terrorism, two things we have to make sure they will end. And I really trust President Trump with everything he says to end those suffering for both sides, for the hostages in Israel, for the Ukrainian hostages, and for the war between Ukraine and Russia.
This was the largest contingent Ukraine has ever sent to attend the National Prayer Breakfast and related events in Jenna. It was interesting listening to them talk about the significance of the United States, Ukraine, and Israel coming together, the power in the room as people pray together for God's grace to sustain and keep these allies together in fighting what they believe is evil in the world.
Yeah, you were there. That must have been really something to see.
Very sobering and very encouraging to see people of all backgrounds and languages worship together in the language of, Christ.
So cool. Very inspiring.
Have a great night.